Mustapa, so over to you, IB.
Okay.
Many aspects of the group is point well view with two numbers which you might want to trust point well view with two numbers which you might want to trust strategies and initiatives. So many. Anyway, let me share with you the rationale for this movie. There are many to share with you. Two reasons why the government is supported. Firstly, we have been working in some cases working silos in the past. I mean, starting from ground zero. We started this many years ago, more than 25 years ago. The establishment of ANTAC, and also the launch of the companies to corridor and its initiative. So we're not starting from ground zero, but over the years, we've been somebody working quite intensively. So the idea of setting up the council is to economy for the is to provide focus and emphasis on the need to work together as a team. So that's point one. Number two, this is going to be one, and we are working on the plan to transform the district economy to be high-income economy. We need to put in place many reforms, and we need to introduce some enablers. And digitalization, of course, is a very important. And 5G, for example, is important for every country. Countries with, in this they are ahead of us. Some European countries like Sweden and many other countries that work in China and also very advanced compared to Malaysia. Therefore, they transform to move Malaysia to the next level. It is important for us to do things differently and to do things in more focus. So these are two main reasons why we decided to have the Buletin. We set up the National Digital Economy Council and also the Perdana Council. This is one, so that we can coordinate our acts in government. And it is important for us. The context of transforming this economy, it is inevitable that we come on board as possible. As you know, we have divided our initiative into 3 phases. We are going to read, obviously some low-hanging fruits. So the first phase is now 2021 and 2022. Next will be going beyond 2025. And finally, we aspire to be a leader in this region in terms of digital, in terms of exports, in terms of getting our public service to be digitally enabled. So we divide it into 3 phases. Next, we're getting, of course, everyone involved. The government will provide the policy guidelines, the government will provide the direction. That direction is found in the blueprint. Businesses, of course, have to come on board, not only the big boys, but more importantly for us, in the context of promoting the inclusive agenda, it is important to get the micro and small enterprises on board as well. So first, we want civil servants, 1.6 million civil servants to be digitally enabled by 2025. Number 2, a lot of opportunities for businesses. 5G will provide a very important platform for businesses to grow beyond Malaysia. Number 3, society will be placed to a great digital mindset among the general population. Malaysia. Studying for school, it's important for students to understand how important this is. And in that context, of course, it's very important for us to reach the divide. This is a big issue globally. Malaysia, the issue, the divide between Sabah. From Sarawak is a bit more advanced than Sabah. Sabah, Sarawak, Kelantan, from Langkawi, there's a big gap. There's a gap between young and old. So these are the B40, of course, various packages introduced by the government that started a lot of money that has been allocated to ensure that we are mindful of this reform. It's very challenging when started to do. So it covers structure, infrastructure, to develop, to roll out, to move forward one year. Ultimately, we want great jobs, of course. High quality jobs. We have to talking with this for some time. We have to move up and then change really jobs, but many good jobs. We don't have to really So 500,000 jobs. There's our plan in the next 4 years. These are quality jobs. Students, the talent that's required in the future. We have to prepare the future, we have to prepare Malaysia to be competitive, we have to be effective investment, to change this next 4 years. That's probably a small number, context, don't be able to invest in so that is a snapshot. Of what we have stored in this year. The region that is decided again, this is going to be the whole of this approach for government businesses. This is going to be the institutions agenda moving forward. Regular so this is effective office and our job is to ensure that all the plans that we described in this movie are effectively and spiritually. So thank you so much for this
Thank you so much, Mohamed, for giving us a snapshot of the relation to the economic blueprint. And we certainly hear you to say that there's a short, medium, and long-term plan, and there are more walks of life within the society will be included, and it will be a partnership between the public and the private enterprise to realize this. And for our discussion further, I would like to introduce our moderator for our panelists. None other than the CEO of Seri, right? So we would like to get the guys to how this information technology can impact us as an individual, as a citizen of Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. John. So, as introduction mentioned, we are going to face of a framework as we embrace social economy and social life. And as so far Irene mentioned just now, it is really a very extensive blueprint, and we can't really go to cover everything today, but we will pick and choose the areas that are of particular interest. And what I really liked about the first introduction just now is the fact that we're talking about something that's inclusive, something that will hopefully break through the silos of inefficiency. And the last thing that I mentioned was the fact that implementation is key. So we're going through these things, but before that, I'd like to introduce the panelists for today. As we know, our guest of honor is Seri Mohamed. He is in charge of the digital scheme and policies that the government is introducing. And next to him, we've got Ms. Serena. Then we are here behind. So again, next to Ms. Serena. And she is the Chief Executive Officer of Perdana. And we take it up really because MPEC has been around since the start of Malaysia's trip or journey along the digital pathway. And we would like to really hear what's going on as we go along, what's all good, and of course what the future holds. Next to here we have Dr. Jasmine. She's the Director of Legal Corporate Development Affairs for ASEAN New Markets, and she deals with Microsoft. And right next to her, so there's another challenge of the digital life with technical issues which may be right? That's fine. Sorry. I was told there's an issue with the sound. I'll just finish off with John, who is the co-managing partner for Rome Berger, and is based in Malaysia, but deals with the Southeast Asian region. So I'll just wait until I'm told that the sound is okay.
Cut line first.
Yeah. Okay. We're no longer live, right? Okay, cut line then. Give us 2 minutes. Is it not like it's like the mic muted like everything or back and go? Yeah.
Okay. Hello, welcome back, and we're really sorry for all the technical difficulties. Ironic, right? We're talking about digital technology and its adoption, and this is what happens. But I suppose it's an important reminder of what's going on. Thank you to all those who send me messages, but unfortunately, as you can see, I can't check my phone right now. But I was also told that Tufan's speech or introduction today wasn't quite clear. So I'm going to hand it back to him to give us a summary or more concise version of what he said, and then we'll continue thereafter in the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. So the blueprint is built upon the successes and why we blueprint what is to provide focus in learning for this blueprint understand working styles learn from very much how we working very much better. So all this is approach we want to develop and let's go to the next level. The economy also so like one to provide focus. Secondly, like explore first the context as one nation which becomes a nation and to quality once this encouragement quality investment which is we decided to move forward and try to go out planning over 10 years. First phase will begin this year, next year, next phase, before example, finally aspire to be a leader for delivery. Very important matter is to ensure that we promote inclusivity. This blueprint young, old, and the other the role of the youth, to ensure that students that's regular all the initiatives contained the installation so develop education is important. We are obviously a control and thereby we will also expect the rollouts coming from the 6 classes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Papa, for not just going through that again for patients allowing us to go through that. I think we will cut this off with the conversation perhaps content as to come with Serena with us today. And as Papa mentioned in his introduction, and that has been around since the beginning of the summit, or the introduction of the multi-media tutorial. So as an institution, there's been a lot of history there in regards to what's been done so far, and perhaps we can chat a little bit about what's being done at the moment, as well as how this connects very much to the plans that you continue to start.
So thank you very much, Tony, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So let me just set the stage by saying that, like, since this is not happening now, we have like today, which is monthly contributes to about 20% of the overall GDP in the country. And so when we get work of digital development, close to 65 years ago, it was about doing something on that. We had to change the South Jaya. Sure enough, we have what it was starting to create the first indicators. So we started the first set of digital development. It's a part of the small industries and things. That's when we had gone to investments with the need for self-transfer and how companies like NC invest in the country and whatnot. Fast forward to 5 years later, where we are right now is about driving mass adoption. Of course, last year with COVID, we all now realize that we live in a world that is digital by default. So everything is online. Therefore, it is to make sure that we spread expanded to 150% to more broadly eventually digital is online. So that's one of the focus that we achieve with online structure. And of course, do that is something that is not alone. I'm still really excited about doing my footprint because for the most part, especially when I first came to this role, I thought, wow, it's again carrying the burden almost, this responsibility to take the champion and now with the holistic approach that you find practice now, where the Prime Minister himself that is pushing on an agenda regarding holistically across all the industries with the public sector as well. I think that's what is required to go from 20% to beyond 50%. In fact, I think the movement we've set targets in what the contribution is and what we do that, of course, is to keep web. And what we do, of course, that's where we working collectively across different sectors. That requires the same approach on this industry we know such a thing as tech stack, digital stack with infrastructure, the enablement layer, of course, the application as well. So that's the picture what is happening on our side. So also from that standpoint, and start to see going forward, a lot of implementation at this point really rests on, of course, the regional silos, collaboration is required, but also in partnership with the private sector as well, because it's still across the country. Of course, government's role is to help provide the infrastructure, but the execution really is out there. So it's Malaysia that has executed this blueprint, not just so much, and then the state. It's our
how will things change in terms of organization? The sometimes the communication has to do with the ones with this new language, for example. How does it work? Who can go to which particular agency or person to get extra help with something?
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's why the whole role of governance actually is a very important role. So when we rolled out mandatory digital, there's clarity in terms of which ministry owns what function. There's 6 for us, what's called clusters. So the Ministry of Human Resources, for example, is the lead starting all the things around alternative sector. We've got the Ministry of Transportation that is all around infrastructure. We've got ministry that leads technology. We've got ministry that leads economy. And we've got ministry of government affairs, the civil society. Of course, we've got government sector. So within that, there are multiple different agencies involved as well. Primarily, there's clarity in terms of who needs what. And of course, that's not perfect yet. My whole idea of segmentation, who goes where. Take businesses, for example. There's differences between businesses that businesses that focus more on the larger companies and banks and versus micro SMEs. And so the whole notion of segmentation is dependent on who the audience actually is. That is something that is the spirit of
Thank you. Maybe Esther, John implemented well, so individuals who not represent Malaysia or Southeast Asia as a whole. I was just wondering what your thoughts are in regards to how this can be implemented, especially when it comes to breaking the standards between all the various agencies.
thank you for the one also the
blueprint is very progressive. It's a bold vision for the nation. 25 years on, I remember when it's almost 30 years that Microsoft has been in Malaysia. We were one of those initiatives that brought the investment into the setup of Microsoft in Malaysia too. It's a bold vision, it's very progressive, anchored on people, government and industry, which is critical. The fact that it is 10 years, a blueprint that's 10 years and it is agile, central to the theme of the blueprint, the way I see it, is the opportunity to not just work with 32 million people, but to cut across and unlock the potential for us to go into ASEAN. I think I want to call out two things, both Yang Mohamed Minister said about focusing on MSMEs. What does it mean to the man on the street, to the smaller industries? And to what Consurina said about breaking the silos. I think I want to call out the fact that it talks about agile policy making. It talks about digital first. Consurina started by saying digital first, and that is what we need. The pandemic taught us one thing, that digital is the future. And in order for us to do that, we need to put in enabling policies. I think Consurina also talked about the digital stack. And fundamental to the digital stack is the enabling policies. And I would say that the blueprint is one bold vision, and we are all saying the same thing, the implementation of it. And all of us have a role to play. We talk about triple helix of the public-private partnership. We are here today because we believe every one of us have a role to play. And that when you are talking, for example, about cloud as an enabler, what does that mean? The implementation, when the government is looking to have 80% of data to be hosted in public cloud, the fact that the government is bold and vision that all applications have to be developed on cloud is visionary. But what does that mean? That means it opens up opportunity for local players to develop this local technology, innovate on this technology, made from Malaysia to the world. That is the opportunity that this blueprint presents. That's how I see it.
Thanks. I think at the core of the blueprint is also, a main part is the infrastructure. And as we know, 5G requires, 5G requires new infrastructure. So our phones, which are today, 4G enabled, won't be able to support 5G, right? So, and on the infrastructure side, we also need new base stations. We need new towers for transmission, and hence it is a costly exercise for the government. And I think the government needs to come up with a very efficient rollout of the infrastructure, such that it's a win for the country, a win for the service providers, and ultimately win for the rakyat. Meaning, if we can do some form of infrastructure sharing to reduce the cost for the service providers, then ultimately the services that will be provided to the rakyat will be at an affordable level. And as a follow-up to that also, the government must also play a key role in making sure that the regulations and standards are set such that we can minimize, for example, collusion of prices set amongst the service providers, so that we make it competitive, we make it affordable for the rakyat. And I think that's key also, core to rolling out 5G as part of the digital blueprint.
There are a few things there, because you're talking about connectivity in terms of actual access to things in the first place. There's also the issue of speed, the issue of cost, because for most people it's quite expensive, and compared to other parts of the region, we are probably not getting as high a speed or as broad a bandwidth as we should be getting. And I think that the core of the blueprint is the fact that people need to be connected. If people are not connected, everything else fails as a consequence. So going back to that, Menteri, you mentioned a bit in your first keynote speech, rather the second one, a little bit about how there are differences in terms of people approaching the digital economy and connectivity in Kelantan, how it's different from Kuala Lumpur, how it's very different in terms of talking to people about these issues as well. What kind of feeling do you get when you speak to people on the ground when it comes to how they feel or what kind of concerns they have when it comes to embracing the digital economy?
For people on the ground, firstly, I think it is connectivity, quality. I think access is a big issue. Towers, for example, we can build more towers and we can upgrade towers from 2G to 4G. This will create a big feel-good factor. Education, I mean, we've been struggling with online teaching for many weeks now. Now, of course, schools have opened, at least primary schools, secondary schools coming in about a week or so. So this is one challenge. There's so many stories in Sabah and many other places. So for folks on the ground, number one, I think they want to enjoy. I mean, digital is also about improving the quality of life of business. It's not only about productivity, it's not only about businesses, but also improving the quality of life. So the quality of life of the B40 and those rural areas will be enhanced significantly by improving access and also the quality of that access. Number two, would be the small enterprises. As you know, there are 1 billion micro and small enterprises. More than 70% of them are micro, very small ones, employing less than 5 people. This is a big challenge for us. MDEC has done a good job, MEDEC and a few other businesses, but a lot more needs to be done. They need a lot of hand-holding, and we have a target of 875,000 micro enterprises coming aboard. And for that, we need help from the private sector, and we are pleased to know that some have come forward to the government. We know that many have been working on the ground for the last many years. Some are working in universities, some have gone direct to the micro enterprises. But we need to get all these initiatives together to make an assessment. I mean, despite all these initiatives, how come we're not there yet? I'm talking about micro enterprises. I think in the last 10 years, a lot of work has been done by many companies, the government as well, but we're not there. So 2 points. One is for B40, for people in the villages, connectivity, the quality of that connection is important. That's what we structure. And next would be the small businesses. They are, I mean, in a pandemic situation, of course, this is very necessary for them to do business. And many of them are keen. Yeah? There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit on the ground. So I see these two, at least in the context of inclusivity, very important initiatives which are coming from the digital economy movement.
Seri, I was wondering, are there any initiatives that you can share with us, especially when it comes to more rural areas?
So thanks for asking that question. Datuk Seri just now talked about inclusivity and small business. And oftentimes when we think about digital economy, we default to thinking, oh, it's AI and all this other stuff. But really, there's a lot to be done as it relates to all these smaller businesses and non-traditional ones. I want to share an example, really because I was just with the community last week. And so let's talk about agriculture, for example. So we tend to think of agriculture as a non-interesting industry, whereas really the reality of it right now is that we import about 60 billion worth of agriculture food a year. And so several years ago, for example, we were approached by the Farmers Association of Perdana. So they came to us with a problem, with a question. Okay, so how do we use technology, digital, to increase the production of our chili? What should we do? And so sure enough, we started, so this Santong Ladang started on their journey. Now, of course, they're lucky that in Banting, for example, Perdana, the infrastructure is there, the connectivity is there, which enabled them to leverage basic connection technology. But what we helped piece together and work together with them is the first step is, of course, knowledge. So we went about and helped to solution and just design a very basic IoT solution working with the private sector as well. It didn't really cost that much, but more importantly was the education, that process, the training that was required, and we worked very closely with them. And then today, based on
that first step of education, providing the know-how, so they were able to decrease the cost of their of farming because it's more precise, it's precision farming, increase the yield and overall productivity by 40%. So that's an example. And in addition to that, the process didn't just stop there. Through digital means, we started to help work with this community to think through the business aspects, the marketing aspects, the payment aspects, and so this community actually, so shout out goes to them because all this was enabled by efficient management on their side. They've been able to organize themselves effectively. So now, Satuan Padang Kuala Langat is producing, when we started, it was 6% of the overall chili production in Malaysia. That number today is 40%. And so that's like right hands-on on the ground, something that we normally wouldn't necessarily think of from default standpoint. And in addition to that, it also has been able to, through this project, help solve the unemployment problem because 70% of the farmers that's doing this right now is youth. And today, where do we go from here? So it's working with the private sector. So we brought like a few banks down to the community, and so we're working with them to help provide funding options to new farmers that would then come in for this. So that's an example where it starts with you need the infrastructure, of course, then you need the knowledge, then you need to equip people with the business fundamentals, so how do you do marketing, how do you do payments, how do you leverage digital solutions for that, and then how do you fund. And so this is an example of an initiative that we hope to be able to replicate more in agri, but of course in other areas as well. When you solution and you provide the necessary ecosystem around it too.
I sometimes feel that it's a bit of a shame that we don't get a lot more of these positive type news in the headlines, right? Because we seem to be bombarded by negativity all the time.
That's right. And so what I tell the team, at least on my side, what's required here, of course, we've got this digital economy blueprint, but when it comes to execution, just think 4 Ps. So first, it's all about partnerships because we can't do it alone. 2, it's the product. So what is it that we're doing? What is our value add? What's the product that we're actually offering to others? So what are we selling? In Malaysia, macro-wise, we have to think, what is the product that Malaysia is selling? What's going to be a differentiator? The other one is pace, because we need to execute fast. And of course, the last one is pride. It's so easy to just to say, yeah, this is not working, that's not working. But there are a lot of success stories that are out there, and our role really, especially on the government side, is to continue to uncover that and scale that. So that's, at least on our side, that's what we're very focused on.
The other thing that I wanted to ask Dr. Jasmine actually was to share some of your experience, or that's your company's experience when it comes to connectivity. Because there is a huge project in the States, for example, about broadband and how it's reaching into more rural areas. So going back to the whole theme of ensuring that no one's left behind, that the connectivity is available even at Kuala Langat or Chile or anywhere else in between, what kind of changes or rather what kind of technology is available that we could perhaps introduce in Malaysia, or what else can be done in the current context to improve connectivity?
Thank you, Dr. Hermi. I think we see, apart from 5G that the government is looking to roll out, I think there has been continuous effort to ensure that, I think at the outset, Dr. Seri talked about bridging the digital divide. I think when we bridge the digital divide, we are actually bridging the opportunity divide. And that is what we are driving. And one of the technologies that we see as that has a lot of potential is the TV white space, using the unused TV band. And this is an opportunity, especially in remote areas. It seeks to complement existing connectivity, but also at the same time reach far-flung places. This will allow at least play 3 big enablers. One, for education. 2 for e-commerce, and 3 for healthcare, especially when we cannot get healthcare out. Today we are very, very focused on ensuring education. There's that bridging, that opportunity divide for education in e-commerce. Somehow we don't think enough for healthcare, and I think healthcare is the other pillar that actually requires this connectivity, especially when we can't fly or get people out in time. And telemedicine has been progressing as well. I think those TV white space and satellite are areas where we see emerging areas for connectivity, and I think the blueprint now has that ambition outlined in the document.
Just to add on the same topic, Rodenberger, we recently published the Global Digital Inclusion Index. And in the index, we assess 4 areas, also we call it 4 A's. So first is the accessibility, number 2 is the affordability, number 3 is the ability, and then number 4 is the attitude. So we need to look at, in terms of bridging the digital divide, holistically, because you can't leave any of the A's behind. And of course, first, like I said earlier, with 5G, the infrastructure is key. So accessibility is the prerequisite. Then second is the affordability. So even if we have a very good infrastructure, even if we can reach, like you said, Dr. Hamid, reaching Jeli or Kuala Langat, but if the people can't afford it, it's useless, right? So affordability is very important. Next then is ability. So even if you make it very cheap, but people don't have the ability to be able to use technology, it's again useless. So a lot of education, that needs to take place, especially digitalizing the workforce, digitalizing the rakyat, digitalizing the gig economy as well, because that is also another important area that we are focusing on for development. And last, also the attitude. And even if you have all 3, but if you don't feel secure, you don't have the right attitude, you think that it's useless or it's not relevant to me. So then, especially the elderlies, the people who are maybe even blind, disabled, or whatever, needs to have some kind of programs, to help them to change, some of their attitude, or also to make sure that they are included in the whole the rollout of the digital blueprint.
On that note, one of the biggest challenges is going to really be changing the public sector, because there is the concept of one's mindset when it comes to efficiency and agility. There is the goal to put everything on cloud so that data is easily accessible, so that decisions can be made quickly and people can interact with the services very efficiently and in a very, I suppose, satisfactory manner. What would you say are the biggest challenges that the Malaysian government is going to face? And perhaps also a bit of sharing with regards to what other countries have done, where they have done well or where they have failed, so that as we start this process with this blueprint, we have an idea of the pitfalls that are awaiting us.
Sure, Dr. Helmi, I can take that on. I think first, let's celebrate the fact that the blueprint calls out 80% of the applications to be on cloud. I think there is aspiration and there is definitely that goal. Clear KPIs have been set. I think the challenge is, while the government has said digital first and cloud first policy, I think now the implementation, we are challenged in 2 areas. The procurement policy. For cloud, the procurement has to be on OPEX and not CAPEX. So how do we now look at that implementation side of it? The second one is we need to be able to write specifications for procurement for digital first. And this is where we talked about, I think at the outset, the ministry talked about the digital challenge for the public sector. I think that the need to upskill and reskill and cross-skill public sector for digital first, for digital native policies, that is going to be critical. If you are going to develop something in cloud, the things that you want to incorporate will be privacy and security. It has to be led with privacy and security. And the public cloud is not to be feared, right? For those companies that are actually developing The security for public cloud, I think there is this still notion that public cloud, the safety of public cloud, the need for data center to be residing in Malaysia, and we are all open for those investments, but free flow of data allows to reduce costs. For a company, we want to attract a startup to set up in Malaysia, they do not want to have data residency any lower than. They want to be able to innovate on data. And those are areas where we see opportunity. And I think countries that have done well, Indonesia, with their ambition to become a startup nation, Singapore as a digital hub, I think Malaysia is primed. We are in a good place. I think it is that next leap forward for us to take it to the next level.
Let me add some basic things to what Jasmine has shared with us. This is about the challenges that we are likely to face in the digital agenda when it comes to government. Firstly, as we know, by 2025, every civil servant will be digitally enabled, and that requires cooperation from all quarters. It's got to start from school. One's got to look at the school curriculum, because 2025 is 3-4 years to go. So there's got to be some special programs. At the moment, about 45% of government services are available online from end to end. Our aspirations for that to go 20%. Why 20%? Because some still requires contact, face-to-face interaction. You might be asking why 80% and not 100%. So this is one issue. The challenge is the talent in government. We need to train them through various, various initiatives. And the government is driven by Mampu. Mampu has got to be equipped with the talent, leadership and talent, because they got to do a lot. They've done a good job in the past, but going forward, they got to be prepared for the challenging future. The other is this issue of transparency, red tape, and bureaucracy, corruption, for example. So this is the impact of having a cloud-first, digital-first policy would be reducing the red tape, getting the government to be more efficient, and this is a very important, intangible, possible tangible improvement, but also intangible improvements that are likely to come our way. So one is to make sure that the civil servant is digitally enabled. We have 1.6 million members, so that's a big challenge in terms of resources, in terms of training, and in terms of exposure. The other is by implementing this blueprint, we're going to enhance efficiency and public service. The issue is, where are we in the context of other countries in the region? We know that some countries are quite advanced by metrics, digital identification, and many other matters. So we're learning from what some countries are doing right, and we will, of course, transfer some of these best practices to Malaysia. So we're going to do better, but more importantly, the challenge is we have to be ahead of the curve. We've got to be progressive compared to other countries. That's our aspiration. 2030, we want to be a leader in the region, and we have to work together to achieve that objective.
Can I add one more thing to that? So what Dr. Seri was alluding to also is steps. The bottom line is execution, and in order to ensure execution, cross-pollination of experiences, of ideas and experience is key. So for example, let's just take MDEC. One of the things that we're in the process of doing right now, we're going through our own digital transformation, reinvention and whatnot too, primarily focused on execution, because we now see, everybody, private companies, public companies, we have to be able to do more with less than half the time. So therefore, making sure that your teams can execute, you've got the right setup, the right support is key. And one of the focuses is, one, it's identifying gaps. So where are we lacking? Where do we need to invest? So make those investments. And then secondly, bring on board, also complement the team with people with practical experience. So we've been bringing on board new talent into the organization, and that's primarily people with experience, so that we can figure out how to do things, some things we've never done before. And it's the same with government as well. So if you're listening, come join government. We need more technocrats.
job pitch right there. John, are you interested in joining? Can you share some of the perhaps studies that you've come across when you look at this sort of implementation?
I think just to also add on when we talk about the implementation, one very important part is innovation. And innovation, when we talk about innovation today, having access to data is very important. So government must have, a clear data policy in terms of how they will enable them to share this data, because when it comes to essential services, public services, utilities, traffic, water, or any general, I would say, regulated kind of businesses, in order for innovation to take place, the government must have some kind of data sharing policy. And that is critical if we want to innovate, in that area. So that, I think, is also a very important area that the government should be looking into.
How can the government increase trust in people sharing data? Because let's look at my Sejahtera, for example. I've got friends thinking, I don't really want to scan because I don't want people to know where I'm at, or I don't want to share the information because there's concern that it may be used for other purposes. So is it as simple as being transparent about the policies, or is it a little bit more than that?
The way I see the lifeblood of the 21st century economy, if you want to embrace digital economy, is data, right? And look at the platform companies, whether it's Netflix or Grab. The fact is, the pandemic pushed us all to use Zoom. Where was the data? We all log in. Nobody questions. But here we are questioning my Sejahtera where I'm logging in when the government is just trying to keep me safe. Right? The fact is, we blindly accept terms and conditions online.
And we never read the full license.
As a lawyer, I can tell you, I don't read. But we question the intention of the government, right? So I think we need to go to that culture of digital first mindset. I'm saying, do not be careless online. Be safe. Be sure where you are going to. But there need to be awareness and education. And what John said about the open data policy, the open data platform is critical for innovation to have the next wave of grabs and startups. If that is what we want to be, if we want to be digital first economy, and we want to drive that data, data is usually anonymized, and it is not used to just give out information. And when anonymized data is used to innovate, traffic information is not going to impact anyone. Or if, from a healthcare perspective, if we have data of outbreak, that data now can be used to prevent. I think there has to be that awareness. And it has to start with government. It has to start with how do we classify our data. 80% of data is public data. We do know that. I think the way data was classified pre-digital era in the analog world cannot now be used for the digital world. We need to have digital native policies for digital economy, and that is going to be critical. And I want to echo John here. If we want to become the next startup, we want to attract scale-ups, and we want to have unicorns and decacorns, we need to be able to embrace that. And I'm looking at and then Ms. Serena to drive the 10 unicorns.
When you're talking about unicorns, because there's always the example of like Grand Mountain Singapore and whatnot, right? Which I'm sure you've heard of hearing right now. But you mentioned earlier on about how Malaysia has to be targeted in terms of what our strengths are. And in the blueprint, there are targets, for example, I think it's 2 unicorns, right, by 2030. Is there any kind of view as to which sectors within our digital economy are the ones that are most likely to produce these success stories? Or are there particular ones where we need to actually give more support?
So for me, I would say it's still too early to tell because if you look at our ecosystem, for example, we are right now in the phase that we call the globalization phase. And of course, when you think about high growth companies, growth needs to come not just from Malaysia, it will need to be global. So all startups have to think global first from the time that you're born. And so for me, I think it's still too early to call my bet at this point, considering all the things that we're doing right now, and the industry themselves. I know there's a lot of activity in the industry right now where everybody's saying, we're just going to do this. We're just going to be on and just go for that. But there are areas where I do feel that we have the lead, and at least on our side, we're committed to continue to build and support. Fintech, for example, is one area that, of course, is part and parcel of digital economy, and Islamic fintech in particular. I think there's a huge opportunity there. We'll continue to do our work. In fact, in the Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama, for example, Islamic economy is one aspect where we know we have an opportunity to build. And so we look forward, one of the things that we want to continue to do is build out Islamic fintech.
If I could just add to that, my big bet is digital Islamic economy. We were the front runners for halal, Islamic finance. I think we could really take and run with that, and I see opportunity for Malaysia for the digital Islamic economy, and we could give a few of those countries like Dubai and Qatar a run for their money, for sure.
And it's a huge economy. When you think about the opportunity it's a market. And so, of course, Malaysia is a economy where we're 32 million people, and then I forget what the GDP number is, but
English quite well, right? And that is an opportunity. To me, Malaysia presents the global digital workforce as a competitive advantage. Digital workforce as a national agenda, ours is a global digital workforce as a national agenda. That's how we position. I don't think we want to compete with Singapore or our neighbors. I think the opportunity to go in is how could we provide employment not just for the companies in Malaysia, but become a hub for countries, for companies in the region and companies in the world to hire Malaysian talent. And that is where I would say Malaysia has, the blueprint presents us an opportunity to address digital workforce, not just for Malaysia, but global digital workforce as a national agenda. That is the approach that I would take. Whether countries are looking to close their markets to allow others to come in, I think every country looks to protect its industry, and that is expected of these governments. But I also think industries run, and they will go where there's market opportunity, and I think that's where we need to look at. And it's a balance between government driving, enabling, and also industry just driving. And we see this in technology. Technology has driven policy. Technology has driven, just changed the way we work. So I would not, while governments could put preferential treatment, some may say, non-tariff barrier, but to me, I can see from the government perspective why they want to protect national economy. But I think as a country that has been open to business, Malaysia has been open to business, we have liberalized quite a number of sectors. I think every country within ASEAN, we have seen the free flow of data, free flow of people, free flow of goods. And that, I think, is a great opportunity.
Let me state the obvious. ASEAN, of course, is an economy which 600 million people growing at a rate much faster than many other parts of the world. So that's the obvious. The other obvious thing is that every country, almost not every country in ASEAN, but a few countries in ASEAN, are positioning themselves as the hub of ASEAN at this point, which means the competition is real. Therefore, we need to up the ante and do a lot more. Let me focus on talent, for example. It is the fact that we've been exporting talent to many countries, so we have to create more opportunities. So this digital blueprint, what we aspire not only to create unicorns and investments, but we have to bring back talent to Malaysia. We have to reduce this export of talent. We cannot eliminate this export of talent, but at least we have to reduce. We have bright Malaysian people working in many parts of the world. So talent is key. Not only at the level of the masses, but more importantly the elite, the best. That's key. The other is the need to have more conversation in the area of opening up. There's been a number of discussions going on e-commerce, cross-border trade. I mean, we still have barriers. Like ASEAN, there's been this conversation, there's been some agreements, if I'm not mistaken, signed between ASEAN countries to promote e-commerce. So this is important. I mean, in the past, tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, movement of physical goods, at airport, ports and airports. But now, I think in the context of e-commerce, we have to change our mindset. We have to look at to revisit some things that we've been doing. Let's look at the ASEAN market, how we can bring down barriers to promote e-commerce, and of course we need to do that. But I think key to all this is to make sure that Malaysia equips itself with the necessary talent. I mean, for Malaysia to be the true hub of ASEAN. As I said, a few countries in the region are aspiring to be the center of ASEAN. And we have to be able, I mean, if we want to realize the objective of being a leader in the region by 2030, then there's a lot more that needs to be done.
I just want to echo Dr. Seri's point on the mindset. If you look at ASEAN, we have nearly 500 million people. And if we always think that Malaysia is our only market, then the mindset is definitely wrong. And we should also work together as a group to see how to tackle the global market. And so we just cannot be a local jumbo champion. But how can the mindset is very important to see how we should be a global champion, and how can we work together across ASEAN, maybe even accelerate the One ASEAN Digital Initiative to make sure that we can work as a hub and the market is global, and that mindset is very important.
How does government and industry work together to get the right type of talent or right kind of upskilling? Because one of the things that we do sometimes find or get back in terms of feedback is the fact that there are sometimes jobs, but there aren't the right people to fill in those jobs. And sometimes there's a disconnect between graduates in terms of what they know, what they have in skill set versus what the industry actually wants. And it might be a little bit of a human resource ministry issue or maybe an education ministry issue, but just wondering if the panel here has an opinion as to how best to bridge that gap.
So I'll start by sharing the communication between industry and academia needs to continue to be tightened, get closer. One of the things, I'll just share one of the initiatives that we've done from an MDEC standpoint for the last couple of years. We have this thing called Premier Digital Tech Institution. So where we work very closely to accredit almost to some of our leading private sector, public sector, as well as TVET institutions to say that, okay, this is what a quality digital program looks like. So there's 17 of them in the country today. But core to that is one of the criteria that we set to say you really need to work very closely with private sector. And so each of these institutions have private sector partners that they either consult and on their curriculum or even provide internships. There's very close collaboration there. And today, these 17, the employability of the graduates from their digital programs are 98 to 100%. And so that's one example of private sector, public sector collaboration. Now, of course, that is something that we piloted some years ago, and so now there's discussion. We continue to share these learnings with others as well. Another example, of course, of private-public sector collaboration as it relates to talent is the shift now. Before, when it comes to training, you would always just, government would just train people and then there's no connection to the jobs. Now you've started to talk about this more often now. It's place and train. So you have to work with, ensure that the jobs are there first, and then as part of that, the training is required to fulfill. You can't just train for the sake of training, it's place and train. So you'll hear, in fact, last year, Perdana, HRDF, KESO, and ourselves even had several different initiatives that really stem around place and train. So it's no longer just training for the sake of training. You really have to make sure that it's tied to jobs, which means that the connection with the private sector to understand industry demand is key.
I find it quite interesting how it's very similar to medical training. Because in medical training, you kind of have to figure out how many, say, specialists you need, work your way backwards. And then we've always been through this whole lifelong training thing, because the moment you stop training or learning something, you're obsolete, because you can't do the procedure or prescribe the right medication. So it's quite interesting how the rest of the world is kind of following that kind of concept.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to digital as well, this whole, John talked about it earlier in the mindset, and you talked about in medical training, lifelong learning is absolutely key. Most of the time when we talk about training, we think training just the university teams, but all four of us over here will need to go through training as well. Like, I don't think I've taken, we all need to take the AI for everyone course, and data science for executives and whatnot.
I think also just to quickly add on education, we also shouldn't be limiting to just say, hey, it's a responsibility of the government, also not only within what you can get available in Malaysia, because nowadays there's tons and tons of courses that are available, from renowned universities, globally, and you can do all these courses sometimes, a few days, for example, at Coursera, you have a 1 week or 2 week even, training programs that are offered by very prestigious universities globally, which we have access to. So we shouldn't be limited our thinking to just what we should push locally, but we should also leverage the resources that are available globally.
If you talk to universities, of course, they will tell you that some of these elements are already embedded in the curriculum, and that's to some extent true. Some companies will be working closely with universities in developing the curriculum, but we've got to be realistic that our graduates need some polishing. So what we need to do is that after having gone through a general kind of training with some elements, digital elements embedded in the curriculum, I think it's important to have, say, a 3 months program in some specialized areas. And as John said, the expertise can come not only from within this, come from overseas. So that's one. And we can use TVET institutions. My understanding is that some TVET institutions are underutilized. There's potential of using some of the spaces in our physical and virtual spaces in TVET institutions. The other is when we talk about talent, we always talk about supply. There's also the demand issue. Yeah, supply is an issue. The universities and various companies which are working with the university. And so this is where the digital economy is both supply. When you talk about talent, of course we produce some talent which are equipped with the necessary skills. But the other is demand, and that is why it's not enough to talk only on half the problem. The other half is demand. Is where investments come in the context of creating 500,000 job opportunities in the digital blueprint. And in that context, we hope to be able to create high quality jobs. And so it is important to bring the demand, and that demand will come from a conducive investment environment. That demand will come from a facilitative public sector, not only tax regime, but there are many things that are required. So we have to push higher in getting investments into Malaysia, so finance policy? Thank you.
The private corporates also play a very important role because they must invest in their workforce. Because if they don't invest in their workforce, they themselves become irrelevant. So spending money on their workforce actually helps themselves. So they play a key role, and again, of course, working closely with HRDF, etc. But they must also start to invest in their workforce.
There's a lot that can be discussed about incentives and to what degree government comes in, to what degree the individual has to have a drive to improve oneself and also the company. But we have time for that. In fact, we've only got about 5 minutes left, so it's amazing how time has flown by. Of course, it wasn't helped by that 10,000 years of waiting for things to get back online. But before we close, I think we'll go back to the very basics, because I think the blueprints, as Dr. mentioned earlier on, is really about the rakyat. It's really about making sure that there is increased, appropriate, and just connection, that there is an atmosphere or an ecosystem where we can thrive. But I think on the ground, perhaps there may be still some confusion or maybe some lack of awareness of what the blueprint is actually about when it comes to day-to-day living. So the panel could perhaps share their thoughts on how a person on the ground should view this and why it's important, because ultimately it boils back down to the mindset. So how can we get people to embrace this and think and accept and cherish that this is a good thing for us?
Okay, just very quickly, awareness education program is very important. Like I said earlier in the 4 A's, the ability and the attitude part also needs to come from the rakyat, needs to come from the private sector, to embrace. So the government also needs to drive the awareness. Corporates also need to drive the awareness, and the rakyat themselves also need to search and understand better. Not just depending on what the companies or the government is doing, but they themselves, should go out and try to embrace and find out more, talking to the people in the sector, in the industry sector, or even just googling, things that they need to find out more to give them that assurance and the right attitude and the right mindset to this blueprint.
Digital economy blueprint is a policy document. The operationalization and the democratization of the policy document, what does it mean to the man on the street, has to be brought down to bite-sized information. I think that, yes, all of us have a duty to make sure that we understand what's in that document, but the pakcik cerotok pun or jeli may not be able to read a policy document, but how do we now synthesize those information that is relevant for education? I think there's a huge element of education within the blueprint. There's a huge element of e-commerce and opportunities. I think that has to be now broken down and turned into bite-sized information. We talked about everyone here having a duty. The government, the private sector, the media has a role to play, a big role to play. And I think that partnership with media, ensuring that the information that is disseminated to the most remote part of Malaysia actually allows for the bridging of the opportunity divide. To me, this is one of those policy documents that actually bridges the opportunity divide, and we need to take that information and make sure that it goes to everyone. Thank you.
So to sum up, I think there's 104 pages in the blueprint. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of committees and whatnot, but ultimately what the blueprint comes down to is that it's a collective effort to improve lives, so therefore we need the enabling infrastructure and whatnot, and more importantly, livelihoods, i.e. how do we create income, how do we make ourselves better to that. And I echo what John and Jasmine said, there is an onus on the individual as well. For example, we have a campaign right now to be out and about to help drive digital literacy, and the name of that campaign is Saya Digital. We debated, okay, should this be like Via Digital or whatever, but it's Saya. We chose Saya because we're trying to say, like, I am digital. So the empowerment is on the individual to embrace, to sit aside the fears that they might have, and then really take this leap forward to embrace the digital economy.
let me highlight 3 points. Firstly, the tangible benefits coming from the blueprint. Secondly, the intangible, we have a tendency to underestimate the capabilities of Malaysians. So let me talk about tangible. Tangible will be, the business opportunities, e-learning, lifelong learning, and that as well, including quality of life. The other intangible, which I'd like to, elaborate a bit, it promotes a new culture, a digital culture. We have to go down the ground to enhance people's awareness of the importance of this digital agenda. Simple things like increased, I do been collaborating, government and business have been collaborating in the last 20 years, but the digital economy is another platform, opportunity for us to work closer. And I must say, in my few months, very much involved in this initiative, there's been a lot more collaboration now with the government and private sector. There's a very important intangible benefit which will drive Malaysia forward. Finally, we cannot underestimate, we should not underestimate the capabilities of Malaysia. Yes, we have some weaknesses, but look at our young people, our students, at a very young age, many of them are digitally enabled already. So we have a promising future, and we have to use this new generation of Malaysians who are digital savvy. But having said that, of course, we are mindful of the fact that we are in a very comparative situation. I mean, we have ASEAN around us, China, which is far ahead than us. So therefore, we have to be constantly remind ourselves that as much as we believe we are doing better now, there are many others who are running fast and faster. So it's a challenge for all of us. And 2030 is the dream we have to position this as a leader in the digital economy landscape. Let's work together, the government of Malaysia, business, and the people of Malaysia coming together to realize this very important vision. Thank you.
I think that was a really way to end the conversation. My key takeaways are really driving efficiencies, job creation, and inclusive agenda, and as we have mentioned many times, the implementation, and that I think will be key to all of this. So I will end there, but before that, I'd like to apologize again for the technical issue with regards to our sound quality. What we will do though is we will make sure that a cleaned up record is available later on for viewership, and then we'll share that widely. And last but not least, since I'm also a doctor, please sign up to my Sejahtera. Make sure that you sign up for the vaccines. I've been vaccinated, I'm still alive, so please go ahead and do the necessary. And with that, I'll hand over to Mr. Chong.
Thank you, Dr. Helmi. Once again, I'd like to congratulate and say our appreciation to the moderator as well as the group of panelists, especially Mohamed, Datuk Mustapa, for giving us his inside information on how Malaysia digital economy blueprint will be able to enrich the lives of Malaysians. And again, on behalf, we'd like to apologize for the sound issue due to audio cable that we were trying to fix. So we want to assure you guys that this will not be repeated. And as what Dr. Helmi has mentioned, the recording of this will be made available later on, and we'll do our very best to clean up the feed. So once again, please continue to engage Seri. Please still continue to post your questions, and we will get back to everyone if we can once the question is posted. Okay, so thank you so much for attending this session with Seri and NC.